for you to share more with our students a little bit about your educational and professional history and what brought you to today.
Sure. Hello, AP students. It's Lin Miranda, and before I was Lin Miranda, I was Mr. Miranda because I used to teach 7th grade English, and actually one of the ways I supplemented my income in my 20s before anyone paid to see anything I ever wrote was as an AP proctor. So I've sat in on many of these tests even before I took AP tests. But I went to a public school called Hunter on the Upper East Side growing up. And then right out of college, I actually went and taught there. So I've had the very surreal experience of having my teachers become my friends because I was just out of school. And really, social studies or 11th grade US history is the reason we're talking because I don't think I would have picked up Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton at the Borders bookstore that used to be in the Time Warner Center if I hadn't written a paper on Alexander Hamilton in high school. What I remembered about Hamilton was that, from that paper, was that his son died in a duel in 1801, and then he died in a duel that happened almost in the same place 3 years later. And I remember thinking, well, that's the most avoidable mistake of all time. How does that happen? And the curiosity over remembering that from US history class was enough to get Ron's book off the shelf and into my hands as vacation reading. And the rest is history.
So you talk about bringing that book on vacation. A lot of us, we're all home now. A lot of us doing a lot more reading. For students, I hope that's at least somewhat in the form of studying. For the rest of us, maybe a little bit more for pleasure. When I plan my reading for vacation, historical novels aren't always at the top of my list. And certainly Ron Chernow's 800-page biography of Hamilton isn't one that instantly jumps to mind, but certainly we now all know the story that it inspires your work in Hamilton. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why the choice of that book and how did that process happen for you?
Well, I think about this all the time, actually, because it was one of the more monumental decisions of my life in retrospect. But a couple of things. One, the year was 2008. So we're in a pre-Kindle e-reader world. So when you're picking books to read on vacation and you're browsing the bookstore, you're not taking 10 because you'll fill up your suitcase. I was looking for one big long book I could read on vacation. So I was on the market for a big book as I was browsing the bookshelves. And two, once I picked up the book and started reading, one, I think the time was right. I was on vacation. I was on my first vacation from in the Heights. And I had been mourning not writing. I'd spent my 20s writing in the Heights. And I think my brain and my heart were ready for a new project to work on. And then I picked up this book and it gets to what you guys are going through as you study US history. There's lots of different versions of the same story. And what Chernow really keyed in on in telling Hamilton's story was his relentlessness. This was a guy who faced a lot of loss at a very young age, saw a lot of economic hardship, and his chemical reaction to that was to produce and to make the most of every moment. There wasn't a moment he wasn't working to better himself, to learn something, to write something. It's kind of an energy I was in awe of as I was reading the book. And I think by focusing on that relentlessness, as opposed to focusing solely on his financial policy or focusing solely on his role in the Revolutionary War, he focused on his relentlessness. And to me, relentlessness is what makes for a great musical theater character. The great ones like Tevye, like Mama Rose, like Sweeney Todd, all have this kind of drive that can't be beat by anything. And so I think that was what I keyed in on was Ron's version of Hamilton. And that's what made him come to life for me.